childcare for the military it's a mission readiness factor. It's a force multiplier, and so it affects national security. You may not think about it in that lens, but our servicemen and women need to have childcare in order for them to focus on their mission. And so Childcare Aware is just one of those entities that go about trying to make sure that they find that quality childcare. Access to affordable care is especially important for military families. Many of them live hundreds or thousands of miles from their extended families. And for them, childcare is critical, in order to serve their mission. The military counts on Childcare Aware of America for mission readiness and relies on us to help its families find quality childcare in the communities where they live. And for many military families living off post, as we call it, off base, they face the same challenges as their civilian counterparts, finding that quality, affordable childcare. And the military demands it in order to ensure that the kids that are military dependents are being served adequately. We solve that problem by being entrusted to find the military, help them solve that childcare problem. We provide expertise and partnership to the military and direct services to its families, and we use what we learn from the experience to inform policymakers and spur action on solidifying America as a childcare strong benefit for everyone.
Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Schaap, co-founder of Social Driver. Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably the world. We are featuring leaders who figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and noisy world. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others.
I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Francisco Jamison, or Fran, the Vice President of Military Programs at Childcare Aware of America and Executive Director of Respite Care of America. Now, before we dive in, here are a few things I think you should know about today's guest. Number one, Fran is a self-described military brat. His dad served in the U.S. Army, where the family lived in Hampton Roads, Virginia, for most of his 20-plus year career. Fran worked for nearly 30 years as part of the Department of Defense military child care programs in a variety of leadership roles, and he supervised a variety of DoD programs, including child development centers, school-age programs, family child care, parent central services outreach programs, youth sports and fitness, and teen programs. Fran has completed all levels of DoD civilian education system training, including advanced and continuing education for senior leaders. Number two, in his role as Vice President of Military Programs, Fran contributes to Childcare Aware of America's mission by leading the implementation of a comprehensive organizational strategy to ensure the quality implementation and expansion of national, military-funded and military-connected childcare programs across the United States. Something a lot of us probably don't think about, but which is really important and we're going to talk about today. And number three, Fran also serves as Executive Director of Respite Care of America, a subsidiary of Childcare Aware of America that aims to provide quality respite childcare for military families with children from birth through 18 years. Now, Fran, you have been called a DoD civilian education system senior leader, a foremost expert on child care in the military, a Kansas City Chiefs Uber fan, and you've even called yourself a military brat. Well, today we're thrilled to call you a chief influencer. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, Anthony, and I like that you accented that chief. That's important to us for those that like the Chiefs. So I'm
Chiefs fan, chief influencer. I'm from Kansas City, and like we were talking about before, we had some difficult years as Chiefs fans. So we're really reveling in the later years with Mahomes have been good to us.
He proves again that leadership is important, even in sports, and that influence takes you places.
100%. Absolutely. Maybe he'll be on the show one of these days. Since
I'll see what we can do about that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Invite me back.
Yeah, we'll have a little group episode. Well, I want to just start by kind of asking you about the problem that Childcare Aware of America is helping the military solve, because, not a lot of people may think about childcare connected to the military, and yet, a lot of families in the military, and actually it's a really important issue and something that you have so much expertise around. So tell us about it, and what do you think people should know?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I mean, childcare for the military it's a mission readiness factor. It's a force multiplier, and so it affects national security. You may not think about it in that lens, but our servicemen and women need to have childcare in order for them to focus on their mission. And so Childcare Aware is just one of those entities that go about trying to make sure that they find that quality childcare. Access to affordable care is especially important for military families. Many of them live hundreds or thousands of miles from their extended families. And for them, childcare is critical, in order to serve their mission. The military counts on Childcare Aware of America for mission readiness and relies on us to help its families find quality childcare in the communities where they live. And for many military families living off post, as we call it, off base, they face the same challenges as their civilian counterparts, finding that quality, affordable childcare. And the military demands it in order to ensure that the kids that are military dependents are being served adequately. We solve that problem by being entrusted to find the military, help them solve that childcare problem. We provide expertise and partnership to the military and direct services to its families, and we use what we learn from the experience to inform policymakers and spur action on solidifying America as a childcare strong benefit for everyone.
So maybe you could kind of explain to us a little bit about what families go through. I mean, like what happens when a service member gets called to active duty?
I can speak from experience. As you mentioned, my father served the military for over 20 years. It's, military families are so special, from my vantage point. The ability for them to pivot when a service member is called to action, it's similar to that of someone who's in emergency services, firefighters and police officers. They're in harm's way. So it changes the dynamic of the family almost instantly when that occurs. And so you have spouses who are now serving in a way as that military support, and the family members, the children included, they serve as well. So when service members are called to duty, their spouses are left behind to take care of childcare requirements. And we know that providing career opportunities to military spouses is important, and that's why we recently joined Military Spouse Employment Program this past year, which is a major accomplishment for Childcare Aware of America. It means we have certified that we are going to support military spouse employment, make ourselves a that much more viable possibility to employ spouses, which is huge for the military community. And we're proud to be part of that program. The other part for military when they're deployed is, of course, the childcare aspect of it, the children themselves. And we do a lot of work working with providers on the ground to provide that top quality childcare for children in every community in the nation.
Maybe you can just elaborate a little bit more. How are most kids in the military have children of the families? How are they getting this childcare? I mean, is it provided directly by the military? Is it private sector? Is it some sort of partnership? Maybe you could just unpack that a little bit more.
Sure. So it's all of the above. So it starts with it starts with on-post care. So the majority of our families, when they first enlisted, and when my father was in the military specifically, childcare was on post. They have brick and mortar child development centers that the military builds on its installations in order to provide that childcare. What we've seen over time, Anthony, is a shift in how our military families live and where they live. And so a lot of them have now migrated into the communities in which they're serving. So instead of living on post, a lot of them are deciding to live off post and in the communities. And that has changed the way that childcare it looks, because now they're seeking more childcare in the community than they were on post. That's when the military came up with a new program called Military Childcare in Your Neighborhood and Military Childcare in Your Neighborhood Plus. And that's where Childcare Aware comes in. So we work with those providers off post, whether they are mom and pops or they're large organizations, to make their childcare available to those military families. And we provide the service where the fee assistance is subsidized. So the amount of childcare fees you'd pay on post, we will be the ones that come in and help you determine what the difference is between off post and on post care. And we provide that subsidy for the families in order for them to use childcare. In addition to that, you now have non-traditional care options where when my father again was in the military, you had PT at 5 o'clock in the morning, or you have weekend drill. We try to find providers who can be available for those non-traditional care hours as well. Because we find in certain areas of the country, that's the most important of the childcare is not just your 9 to 5, but it really is after 5 o'clock and on the weekends, providing that care as well.
I wonder if you could talk about, um, you know, you mentioned, for example, like the hours might be different for a military family. And so providers need to be aware of that and, accommodate that. It's important that there's that match. What are some of the other things that it's important for communities and childcare providers to know about the unique needs of military families? And how do you make sure they know that? Because when we think about the lens of influence, it's one thing to say folks should be aware of something. And then it's another thing to make sure you actually get that message to the right people at the right time.
No, it's great, Anthony. So right out of the gate, I think the most important thing is that military families are families. They're civilian, like their civilian counterparts. They really are. It's just that their service to our country puts them in a unique situation where they tend to move every 2 to 3 years, which is different than their civilian counterparts. They are oftentimes remote and isolated in some cases, meaning I grew up in Hampton Roads, Virginia, for the most part, but my father served in Korea. He served in California. He served in different places in the world, and it was either accompanied or unaccompanied. But when it was accompanied, I'm moving, and so I'm new to this environment. I don't know the lay of the land. Neither does my mother, and so all the family is learning about this new environment all at the same time. So we're trying to find housing, and we're trying to find schools, and we're trying to find churches. And so what I would ask providers to know is, military families might need a little extra TLC, tender loving care when they're coming to you new, but they're drastically loyal, and they are very much about being community. So welcome them, because they're some of the best people you'll ever meet. And how do we get that word out? We work with our DoD branch partners in order to make sure that every community that we're working with military, child care, or neighborhood or plus gets this kind of information. It really is something the military has done a great job in the last 20 years, in my opinion, is seeking partnerships in local communities and making the military lifestyle more palatable for folks to understand what our military families are going through.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about how you get the information out to the military community, I recently had the opportunity to be at a coalition meeting for Face the Fight, which is a really important initiative that's focused on the challenge around veteran suicide and reducing that. And one of the things I was reminded about, and you really kind of laid this out nicely, is, military families are just families, right? So the ways that any family gets information, they might follow influencers, they use social media, whatever. That also works. But then at the same time, there are special ways to get information out to military families through the DoD, through Military Times, for example. And so it's kind of knowing what are some of those same strategies that will work to get your message out, but then what are some of the other tactics that are more specialized? As you mentioned, the DoD does a good job of getting information out to military families.
Yeah, platforms like yours. I mean, isn't it a beautiful thing? We're here 2025, and this platform, among many, are available for military families and their civilian counterparts, meaning you can be in Washington State and subscribe to your show. And even though we're PCSing to, Korea, we can still get your show. So it's great that military families have these kinds of platforms and social media alike to stay current with communication and with the information that they need. It's so much better now than it was, say, 30 years ago, where you're right, we were stuck to the newspaper or to magazines and stuff. This is such a much better option for our families.
Yeah, and one of our recent guests was Steve Schwab, the CEO of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. One of the things he really focused on is, when we're trying to reach, any community, but in particular, he focused on military families as well. You have to find authentic ways to get the message out. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that, because especially the fact that you have this lived experience, having been, as you called it, military brat, having grown up, with a dad in the military for so long. I bet people really listen to what you have to say because you have that expertise, and you can show up as an authentic leader the way Steve told us is so important.
I did see that episode, as a matter of fact, and I certainly can understand where Steve was coming from, and certainly in the military community, we're like any other community. We talked about the Chiefs earlier. when you find one of your own, we have the ability to kind of lock eyes. So when you enter a room and someone is talking to you and you find out that either they were a brat or they served, obviously there's a instant trust and camaraderie there. So meeting people where they are, as Steve was getting to, is absolutely critical. And the military community is really no different, So the difference being they travel a lot and they PCS a lot, but when they find themselves in new areas or new locations and new locales, they're going to look out into that community and try to find like-minded individuals. So, whatever that is for the location that you're in, and as Steve was alluding to in his episode, it's the criticality there is being genuine. Like if any community, genuine advertising, genuine communication opportunities. Military folks, like any other entity, they can sense people who are genuine and have lived values similar to theirs.
Okay, now some folks may not know what PCS means, so you have to tell us.
That's the military in me, so we love our acronyms. Permanent Change of Station. So that's what the military calls our moves. When a service member is moving from one location to the next, it's called a Permanent Change of Station, or PCS.
Yeah, military has a lot of specialized lingo and acronyms, doesn't it?
It does, and it's hard to get it out of your brain once it's in there.
Yeah,
can't get out.
But people in that world, they know what it is. So I just wanted to make sure folks also do. You also serve as executive director of Respite Care of America as part of your role. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what is Respite Care of America and why is it important?
Thank you for the opportunity. So Respite Care of America is a wholly owned subsidiary of Childcare of America that primarily operates in the state of California. And what respite care is for our military families is a great benefit that the DoD has for families who are serving with exceptional family members. Typically, these are children and adults with special needs in some capacity. And so the military over time has recognized, again, that this is another community that needs additional support. And it provides families with a certain amount of hours per month where a provider will come to their home and provide respite care. So essentially, let's just say it's 32 hours a month. You're able to use those hours for a provider to come to your home, and it allows you for that mental and physical break from the childcare and the parenting that you're providing to your family member. And then you can use that for, school or gym time or appointments, et cetera. And that's really been a benefit because, having a special needs child myself, I have a type 1 diabetic in my daughter. That's a task. Living with special needs family members is a blessing, but it's also it takes great mental acuity, and that respite care provides them with time for themselves and sometimes couples for each other in order for them to stay sharp and come back to their family member with renewed vigor.
How long has that been around?
Wow, respite care. So EFM has been around for decades. Okay. And the respite care program itself has been around for probably a little over a decade. And it changes over time, the amount of hours assigned, and it is by branch, Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Space Force, Air Force. But it's a great program regardless of what branch you serve for, because again, it allows for families to get that extra support that they need.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. I'm a proud GW graduate myself, and I can attest that the faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information.
I'm always learning, and I'm sure even maybe people in the military are always learning about, programs and benefits available that just there's so much to know. I even learned recently there's a special, kind of like a secret hotel at Disney World that's only for the military. And it is like a hot commodity that, members, service members can reserve. So I just feel like there's so many resources there that it's important that folks in the military know about, huh?
Anthony, your viewers are not going to believe this, but you actually did not rehearse this with me. I cut the ribbon at that hotel opening when it opens.
Did you really?
I was the Army team president at the time when I was a young person, and my family and I were invited down by the military to be one of the folks to cut the ribbon at Shades of Green in Orlando, Florida. Absolutely
Oh my
true.
God.
1994. We didn't rehearse this at all, but yes,
We didn't. I didn't even mention it to you before.
that
Well, I
was
just
that ribbon.
learned about this a couple
Yeah.
days ago from somebody at a dinner, and I was like, "Well, like I had no idea." But
I-
apparently, in the military, people know because
oh, yes.
it's like the most cost-effective way to go to
Yep.
Disney World, and so military
Absolutely.
members know.
Absolutely. That's how my family and I went to Disney. So I was invited down. I got to meet several dignitaries. It was a great opportunity. Colin Powell was one of them. So it was
Wow, how cool! What a
absolutely.
cool story. Well, you just referenced, being a military brat, being a kid in the military, and I assume you received some type of childcare, and when you were, your military family, and now you're in this kind of role, ensuring that military families have access to childcare, so it kind of feels full circle. Can you talk a little bit about just your own journey of how you ended up going from where you were to where you are?
Sure. So yeah, my dad was in the army, as we've mentioned a couple of times here, and I was just a typical military child. In those days, my mother actually didn't work immediately. She actually went back to work after my brother was a little older. But that was the pivot point when she went back to work, where we kind of needed some childcare at the time, and so we started attending our youth center locally, and we would just do fun things at the time. This is in the 80s, so we went on field trips and the like. Over time, I just loved the environment of it. I loved what it meant to me as a young person. And so very early on, I recognized what I wanted to do with my life. And so I've been dedicated to working with young people ever since then. I started at 15, working for the Department of Defense and its military child care programs as a $4.25 an hour employee with no benefits and no guaranteed hours. And I just slowly worked my way up, So by 23, I was a young director running a child care center in Virginia Beach, and just have kept going ever since. And then I became an administrator, and then a chief, and then I served my 30 years, and this opportunity for Childcare Aware of America, a company that I recognized and respected, came up, and I thought to myself, what a great opportunity to do something different while still serving military families, which I have a passion for, and to join a nonprofit, which I had never done before. And, it provided me an opportunity to kind of grow my own leadership acumen, because I had done all the things I could do working with the military childcare spectrum, but this afforded me the opportunity to do some things a little bit differently. And so it's been a great adjustment to come over to a nonprofit. And even in talking to you today, Anthony, the military in me speaks out and seeps out a lot. And so having to talk to my civilian counterparts and explain through acronyms and vice versa has been such a treat. So they're getting a little bit more military as I get a little bit more nonprofit every week here as I go through this.
Yeah, but you're good at translating to a civilian like me, so thank you. Would you, I guess, consider yourself an advocate for affordable, quality childcare for military families? Is that a safe assumption to say you're an advocate?
Absolutely, an absolute advocate, and I center that around the work that I've done for the military for the better part of 30 years, advocating for the availability, affordability, accessibility, and accountability of childcare.
So I guess I'd love to ask, like, how do you leverage your own influence, especially because you have so much direct experience, to be an advocate and to drive policy changes and to help the public understand, the importance of quality childcare for military families and even improve the system? I mean, how have you sort of found that you're able to leverage your own influence as an advocate?
So from my background, my mentors always taught me that, leadership is influence. So I love that you have this podcast and you use that word. It's what stuck out to me when we were getting together. Leadership is influence, and influence is leading. So any opportunity I have to try to affect change, I try my best to do that. I'm blessed to work in an organization that is bigger than me. We have a fantastic policy team, and I work with them as needed when it comes to military things. But they do work for all childcare, not just military. But when I'm in a room with other leaders, it's important for me to learn about them and what makes them tick and the advocacy that they're trying to achieve. And in that realm, I'm trying to impress upon them the importance of the things that are important to me. And so for me, it's always military families and military childcare. But when I'm dealing with, Kinder Cares or Bright Horizons or whoever we're working with, it's trying to be a meeting of the minds of, what are you trying to get after? What am I trying to get after? And we often meet in the middle. So even at Childcare Aware, where our advocacy right now is making sure America is tracking that we are at our best when childcare is strong. When childcare in our country is at its premium, then everyone benefits. And that's where I see that work every day from our CEO all the way to the newest person who works here. We're all trying to get after strong childcare in America.
And I would have to say, when I think about a number of issues going on in the world right now, and, obviously there's some division in our country, but childcare and quality childcare for military families is probably an area that a lot of people can agree on. It's probably nice to work on an issue like that you can, get people from different points of view to see, yeah, this is really important.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the best things about this is we really don't face as much pushback as one might think. But childcare is also, while it's mission critical and it's a force multiplier, it is complicated. So childcare individuals and agencies, we don't get in this business to get rich. The cost is significant, and someone has to pay that cost, whether it is the family, or in the case of the military, offsetting that cost. Finances and funding does play a part in this. And so that's where I think some of our advocacy goes, is trying to figure out a way where childcare is strong, quality childcare is available, it's accessible, it's affordable. But it takes, a team of individuals all over to keep that at the forefront of folks' minds, because as you stated earlier in the show, childcare isn't always the first thing people think about, but it certainly has come a long way, because now it's not number 117 either. It's in the top few things that people think about when they're moving, whether you're looking at, Zillow or wherever. You look for schools for your children, you look for property value, but you're also looking now for childcare and how to keep up with that as well.
And as you think about, going back to being an advocate, for that issue, who are some of the stakeholders that you have to make sure that you reach and that you influence with that message? There's some that kind of are obvious to me, and there are probably some others that I may not even be thinking of.
Wow, thank you for the question. So, it's divergent, because it's sometimes you're talking to other executive directors of a variety of different childcare serving organizations or child serving organizations. It's sometimes families directly themselves, advocates of families. Obviously, as you probably are thinking, it's folks on Capitol Hill. So it varies, CEOs, it varies. But what I always think to myself about, back to leadership and influence, I try my best to treat people similarly, the same. I talk to the CEO the same way that I talk to the person who's making the coffee in the morning. And that advocacy is as strong in me when I'm talking to the CEOs as I am talking to a family member. For me, my dad ingrained that in me, and the military has put that in me as well. Treat people well. Respect is something that is certainly given on a daily basis. And so when you're advocating for something as important as childcare, I try to keep in mind where I came from. I was in childcare as a child. I ran childcare as an employee. I oversaw it as an administrator. And so I carry that lunchbox with me every day when I'm having those meetings. So when I'm meeting with a person, I'm giving them personal experience, which I think goes a long way. I'm not talking about an abstract thing. I've either been in the classroom and someone's changing my diaper, or I've been in the classroom and changed diapers. And so that goes a long way.
What do you wish more Americans knew about the needs of military families? Because the military is obviously, the number of Americans in the military right now is smaller than it was, many decades ago, right? So the direct experience of some Americans is just not there the way it was in, for example, my parents' and grandparents' generation. And what do you want Americans to know about military families that they aren't aware?
Wow. Several things. And it starts again with something we talked about earlier. I mean, I want them to know that military families are very similar to them. It's not some kind of huge divide between military and civilian families, just that they have some exceptional circumstances, some unique things going on in life. that are just different than maybe their civilian counterparts. I also think it's important for them to recognize that the military childcare system, I think, from my foxhole, is a model for the nation. It's one that I think many civilian childcare entities can look at and try to replicate. Not easily so, because obviously the military childcare system is subsidized, which makes a difference. But the way that they go about ensuring accountability, affordability, availability, and accessibility is critical. Every person in the country who needs childcare, Childcare Aware of America, wants to ensure that they get that quality childcare and that it's available and affordable. And I think for us, it's important that any advocate out there, joins us in that same fight to ensure that quality childcare is defended at every chance and every opportunity, because child development and early childhood education is critical to the future of our nation. Not to become glib, but we all believe the children are the future, and so that investment in them is critical.
I love that Whitney Houston song.
I was listening, and I'm here for the rights.
That's a good one. Say those 4 A's. I like those 4 A's and how you just get it really clearly across. Just say them again for folks.
Sure. Accessibility, affordability, availability, and accountability. And what I mean by those are, for accessibility, that childcare has to be somewhere that people can get to it, and it sounds kind of funny, but it's true. If you've got one childcare center and it's across town, that can become cumbersome for families. Affordability speaks for itself. It has to be something that families can afford. Availability gets complicated because obviously ages of children does matter. Infant care in this country is very difficult to acquire in comparison to school age care for first through fifth graders. And then accountability is back to that quality. That's where you're talking about what mechanisms are in place for childcare to be seen as quality. And in our world, that tends to be nationally accredited or state licensed or local licensed childcare.
Well, it just strikes me as you talk about that's so important, because if a family feels like they can't get great childcare, then, that might be an influence as to whether they decide to, continue service in the military or not. So it is so important, and that, because those are those 4 things that you described. That's what everybody wants for their family, right? So I just love how you have it in the 4 A's so that it's really memorable for folks. It's such a good mechanism.
Of course, multiplying is exactly what you're talking about, Anthony. I mean, that's why I think the military has recognized childcare as a force multiplier. Our service members use childcare as one of the thought process behind whether they enlist in the first place, or certainly if they re-enlist. And equally so is that military spouse employment, where if their spouse who has gone out and gotten their degree or has their passion in life, whatever occupation that is struggling to find employment, that takes a toll on the relationship as well. And so we're trying to support on both ends, having the childcare available for our service members and that military spouse employment as well for a well-wanted family.
So, Fran, as you look to the future, I mean, what's your vision? What do you hope the future of military childcare programs will look like?
I look forward to a day where we have less childcare deserts. We call them deserts. It's areas geographically where childcare is an additional challenge than it is anywhere else in the country. And that's going to take some time for us to work through some things. But childcare deserts affect military readiness. It's a problem for day-to-day operations or rapid deployments. So I look forward to a day where, while the military does depend on the availability of quality childcare and skilled caregivers, I think it's important for us to recognize that these things are attainable. It just has to be a priority. If we prioritize the future of our children insofar as ensuring they have the tools necessary, which means the providers and teachers that they need in order to blossom and bloom, I think, I'll live in a world where my grandchildren will be better off than my children, and my children are already better off than I was.
That's great. Is that the legacy you hope to leave as someone who's really influencing this field?
That's one of them. I mean, certainly we all want to try to leave the world a little bit better than we found it, and I'm hopeful. And we have to remain steadfast in our hope. It takes a united front. In the childcare realm, it does still take leaders, and leaders, again, as we said earlier, have to have that influence. And So we are constantly looking at ways to affect change and be about change management. And Childcare Aware of America is, at the very front, the forefront of that in the United States, making sure that even with military childcare policy, that we have thought leadership. We want to sit at every table available to us to make sure that we are advocating for quality childcare and that we are singing the praises of why that's important to everyone in the country. I mean, even if you
Yeah.
don't have children, childcare is important because your neighbors do. And when childcare is strong in the United States, and then the United States is strong.
Absolutely. Fran, and I understand April is the month of the military child. So what should we know about that?
Yeah, April is the month of the military child, and since 1986, it's been an opportunity for military communities, but really anyone in the United States to celebrate military children. Military children, they serve too. They're part of this military infrastructure, the PCS, the permanent change of stations, the military lifestyle. They're living that every day, right alongside their service member, mom or dad. And so any opportunity we have to celebrate military children, I'm all about that, including the purple I wore today. Purple is the color for month of the military child. So thank you for the opportunity for folks to be told that, this is that month that they can go out and celebrate military children.
Very on brand. Last thing I just want to ask you before we wrap up is you've spent so much time, working with the military and defense world. Are there lessons in leadership from the military that you think civilian leaders who are listening today might be able to apply?
Gosh, several, several. I'm gonna a couple that I'll use here. I think it's important for any leader to recognize in the military, because of the way that it's operated, it's important for senior leaders to remember where they came from. Oftentimes in the military, you start at the very beginning, a specialist or a private, and you work your way up. Even if you're an officer, you start at one place and you end up at another, meaning always remember where you came from. As a leader, try not to forget that you once were the person that you are assigned to supervise or provide guidance to. I try my best to not forget that every day that I work. I think for me also, leadership is an Army acronym that we use, and it's LDRSHP. And what it means is loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, courage, personal courage, integrity, and honor. And I live by those. As a military brat, and my father as a service member. And then it's everything that's involved with how you conduct yourself as an employee and as a leader, and the environment in which you work. And so I would offer that up to civilian counterparts. That you don't have to have all of those necessarily, but the one that stands out to me is that personal courage and selfless service. It's about giving back to in communities. The personal courage to do the right thing. And childcare for me is the right thing. Childcare for the team that I work with and work for, our CEO believes in this heavily. Childcare is a absolute criticality in our country, and we have to continue to be the ones to bang that drum so that folks understand that in every decision we're making going forward, children and how they're being treated and cared for and developed is at the very forefront.
Very well said. As we talked today with you, Fran, our chief influencer and Uber Chiefs fan, I thought it was really fascinating to sort of look at the perspective of influence through an issue that a lot of people probably don't think about. That's sort of the infrastructure underneath that is so important when we're talking about the issue of childcare in the military. And thinking about the complexity of that, the importance of understanding folk needs and listening to be able to adapt to them. And then I just love that you brought in some military lessons that you wove in, throughout the conversation, talked about the importance of respect and, treating everybody with respect, whether they're the CEO or the most entry-level person. And then you close with that great acronym about leadership, but also the lesson of, remembering where you came from, that everybody starts and goes along that journey. And I think that, sometimes when we think about influence, we might think about an issue that everybody knows about or that's really public. But today we were talking about one that, like I said, at least for me, hadn't given a lot of thought to, but you showcased how important it is and gave us really powerful stories of influence to make sure that we create a bright future with the issue that you work on, and that you're really a top leader around, one of the foremost experts, which is childcare in military families. So I want to say thank you for being with us today and sharing your story. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure being here, and I thank you for the service that you're providing through this platform to so many leaders and so many subscribers to learn so much from you and your platform, Anthony.
Thank you. Fran, as we wrap up, just tell us where we can go if we want to find out more about Childcare Aware of America and the work that you do.
Sure. So, Childcare Aware of America, we know what it takes to make childcare work for children, families, providers, and communities. We look forward to folks contacting us, and they can do so through childcareaware.org.
Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.